Welcome to the Freedom Lovin' Podcast. This is Kevin, and this is episode number 4. Today I have a guest on the show coming up in just a minute. His name is Steve Michaels, and we discuss a few things. Very interesting interview. The first thing is freedom and how to live it in an unfree world, which is obviously a recurring topic here. Perpetual travel and what exactly that means. How to anonymize yourself with a New Mexico LLC. Bitcoin and what it can do for entrepreneurs, and staying positive in an uncertain world. So that's coming up in just a minute. Otherwise, I wasn't able to make it to the Bitcoin conference that was last weekend, unfortunately, but I did go to the party on Saturday night. There was a kind of a Bitcoin exclusive party at a local bar there in downtown San Jose, and met a lot of people. There was a huge crowd. And it was really cool to kind of interact with everyone at that was going to the conference and talking about all kinds of ideas, and just an exciting place to be. There was actually 1,100 people that registered or that were at the Bitcoin conference. So it's obviously really growing. And one thing that was kind of an overriding theme among all the conversations I had was that it's no longer a question of, is Bitcoin for real? This is definitely for real, and lots of stuff is happening, and there's all sorts of debates and ideas floating around that make it a real exciting place to be. And I'd love to hear from anyone that has any ideas surrounding Bitcoin. So just shoot me an email, kevin@freedomlovin.com, and let's see what else. I'm getting ready to go do a little exploring. As I mentioned in the last show, I'm going to be heading to Boulder, Colorado here in just about 10 days. So I got a lot to do before then, but really looking forward to that, seeing kind of part of the Southwest, and then seeing Colorado, and then hanging out in Boulder for a couple months. So, and then also I've got some exciting guests coming up. I'm really can't wait to have a couple people that are coming on the show very soon on, and we're going to get into all sorts of interesting topics, freedom related. So that's it. And if you like this show, please help us out. Just give us a rating and review. That's at this point even better than if you wanted to donate. So just ask you to go to the blog freedomlovin.com and check out the link to iTunes, and then just write a quick review and give us a rating. That would be awesome. And I am working on getting my Bitcoin donation widget up, so I'll have that. I should have that pretty soon. But in the meantime, we're growing and exploding, and I think I've multiplied my listenership by about 10 since the first episode. So that's awesome to see. So thanks for all your support. And that's about it. So without further ado, here is my interview with Steve Michaels. And in the meantime, have a great week and go out there and build some freedom. All right. Well, I'm excited to have my good friend Steve Michaels of keepyourassets.net and theperpetualtraveler.com on the show today. Steve, welcome to Freedom Lovin'.
Hey, thank you for having me, Kevin. Glad to be on.
Yeah, sure. How's life treating you in Carlsbad today?
Doing fantastic. Just love the weather we're experiencing in Southern California. Glad to be out here, and just glad to be on the show too. Love your podcast.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. So I asked this question to every guest I think I've had on the show so far, and so I want to ask it to you to start off with, and that's, how would you define freedom?
I love that question, and it's I can answer it in a whole bunch of different ways, but I'll start with just a couple here that I really like, and one of them is, one of my favorite authors and speakers is a guy by the name of Butler Schaefer, though, a great author. I like the way he defined it. He said, freedom is a condition that exists within your own mind, and it is to live without contradiction, to live without confusion, and to live without conflict is to be free. So I'll say that again. Freedom is a condition that exists within your own mind. It's to live without contradiction, to live without confusion, and to live without conflict. And then he goes on further and says liberty is a social condition in which free people live together. So he kind of makes a distinction between freedom and liberty. But yeah, I'll keep going though, if you don't mind, because I think there's more to freedom, and I think freedom is based on the principle of self-ownership. It consists of every individual having the inalienable right to his or own life and liberty and justly acquired property. So every man owns his own life, and therefore he has the right to do anything he wishes with that life, so long as he does not forcibly interfere with the life of any other person. So freedom is self-control, not license to impose on others. And, then I can add one more short definition to that because I think it kind of ties it up real well. This is another one of my great authors, or favorite authors, is Harry Brown, and he stated real succinctly that freedom is self-defense. And to elaborate on that, I have the philosophy that your level of freedom is in direct proportion to the degree of self-defense that you've procured. Mm-hmm. So the better you are at protecting your life, liberty, and property, or the better tools that you have, then you have that higher level of freedom. So those are just a couple of thoughts.
Yeah, no, that's awesome stuff, and that's exactly why I wanted you on the podcast, because I think you've got the idea of freedom and liberty, and you've kind of got that down, and you're also living the freedom in an unfree world life that I keep talking about on every show that I've done so far. And you even quoted Harry Brown there, which is also one of my favorite authors. So yeah, that's perfect. And now you're the perpetual traveler, so you've come all the way, and you're experiencing freedom to a pretty high level at this point. So that's awesome stuff.
Absolutely, as much as possible, considering the world we live in. But
exactly.
but surprisingly, people can achieve a very high level of freedom, but it takes some purposeful actions, So anyway, but yeah, it's not given to you for free. Freedom is not.
Yeah, that's right. The famous quote. So what was it in your life that got you thinking in terms of freedom levels, like we were just talking about, and why didn't you feel free before that?
Sure, you bet. It's one of those nagging feelings as you grow up and as you interact with the world around you, that you start wondering what something just doesn't feel right. When you want to do something that is perfectly harmless to other people, and you run into opposition for that, whether it be social pressure or legal restrictions. There's something inherently wrong with that, because you see that there's some act or social norm that restricts you from acting out your life the way you wish. And so that got me to thinking, and instead of just accepting, the standard answers, which are because I told you so or because it's against the law, I had to really kind of try and think a little deeper. And it was not until much later in life that I really started to look at it from a philosophical level, but just from a pure instinctual level early on. I think we all sense that anytime we're told no, we ask why, and we look for valid logical reasons as to why maybe a certain type of behavior is not accepted in the general sense. And so we look for logical reasons. We want to know why. And so when in doing that, of course, I ran across a lot of things that just didn't make sense. And, simple things like, why is the speed limit 55 instead of 56, or why do I have to wear a seatbelt, or, all these other victimless crimes, like taxation, since when does someone have the right to take something that I've produced without my voluntary consent? And so all these little things caused me to start thinking deeper into it. And so if I had to pick an exact date, it was probably when I became I went into the world and moved out of my home and started fending for myself. And then you go into the marketplace where you have to survive and produce. And that's where you start running into some of these roadblocks out there.
Yeah. You touched on the idea of like when we're told no, it's like we want to know why. And it's interesting. I had on my Facebook page, I had quoted somebody I heard in Target the other day. It was disturbing to me, but apparently to some people it's just the norm. So a lady, I walked by an aisle and I heard a lady say, "I think if everyone beat their children, we'd live in a better world." And I was wow, like that just, I was like, I couldn't even think for like a few seconds. I was like, I can't even believe I just heard that. And
Just shocking. Yeah.
yeah,
Wow.
so I opened up my phone, and I opened up my Facebook app, and I put it in my phone, and I didn't put any commentary on it. I just put the quote, and then I said thoughts question mark, and I got kind of across the board. I mean, some people were like, "Hey, there's nothing wrong with spanking a kid. There's nothing wrong with if it helps to kind of put them in line." And then people were giving me examples of like, well, so my friend. He's got a kid, and he spanks him, and it corrects whatever the behavior is, and then it never happens again. But that right there is going to what you said. They may not. Someone may get hit, and they learn. Okay, I'm not going to do this because I get hit, but they don't know why. They don't understand why, and then later in life, whether it's a few years later or like in adulthood, they're going to be kind of at this confused level where it's like they're doing all these things just kind of on autopilot, but they don't really know why. They don't have an explanation to it. And I think that leads to a lot of problems, and then it leads to that feeling of like, wait a minute, I'm not free. I don't I don't feel at all free. And then, the cycle continues in terms of the societal pressures and the government pressures and everything else.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, every situation, it's oftentimes there are no black and white, and there's always different circumstances.
Sure.
But, anytime there's violence involved, it's a very dangerous threshold. And of course, beating your children is violent. And so, but I mean, maybe on a less poignant example is one that I just had day before yesterday, and of this society trying to impose its belief systems, and I shouldn't say society, but I should say other people upon you. A lot of people talk about the government, and I maintain that there's no such thing as the government. There's just other people acting in an antisocial manner, and that's typically how you get government. And so it's just other people. It's not some mystical creature out there. But I was driving home, and my phone rang. I picked it up and I put it to my ear. And of course, in Southern California, they frown on that. They even have laws against that. But of course, I've been driving many, many years, and I drive very safely, and I had to take this call, and I did. And so I drive about 2 blocks, because I was about 2 blocks from the supermarket where I was at. And so I parked the car, and I'm still finishing this conversation, and a lady walks up, walking down the sidewalk right up to my vehicle. And she kind of walks up to the side and looks in my passenger window. And the whole time I'm carrying on a conversation, I'm just wondering, is this lady confused? Does she not find her car? Or, and I watch her, and she walks to the back of my car, and she takes a picture of the back. And I still am not putting it together. I'm thinking, who is this lady? What's she doing? And she comes to the front of my car, and I'm still carrying on a conversation. So I'm trying to be focused. And she's taking a picture of the front of my car. And so I finally, curiosity gets me, and I paused my phone call, and I put my phone down, and I said hello, and she asked me some question. I have an old sticker on my windshield, and she asked me about that, and I forgot what I said, and then she just walked off, and so it wasn't until later that I got to thinking about it that this was probably, and I don't know for sure, but probably someone who was behind me in traffic who thought that, I shouldn't be on my phone, and wanted to take pictures of my license and so on and so forth. So, but it's just a classic example of other people wishing, this is how I define government. Government is a group of people who seek to impose their opinions on everyone else with force.
Right.
And so the problem we have in the world is not a government problem. It's a people problem. It's people seeking to impose their opinions on other people and are willing to use violence behind it. And so we get a lot of these victimless laws out there. So I could talk all day about that, but that was just another example of being told no.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting, because it's like, people, whether it's not even, like you said, it's not a government problem. It's just people are kind of enforcing these their beliefs on you either way. Whether it's government or just their own like little things that they're controlling behaviors and things like that. But when you say violence, a lot of people think, well, what do you mean violence? Like they're not, like that lady didn't use violence. She just believes a certain thing, and maybe you don't agree with her. So what I'm assuming that you're saying is that she's willing to call the cops. Well, the cops come, and if you don't agree that you shouldn't be on your phone in the car, then you have to comply with them, or there could be violence. The guns could come out, and you could be taken away, and if you resist that, then it could get really ugly.
Absolutely, yes, and that's the gun in the room, as they say. A lot of people, all laws are backed up by a gun.
Right.
So anyway, yeah, very interesting. So
so we have this pretty unfree world in a lot of ways. What do you see as the first step to living free in an unfree world?
Okay. I would say that the first step is to start by defining your personal philosophy or your personal code of conduct. And so that takes a certain amount of introspection to figure out who you are and then how you fit into the world and how you relate to other people in the world. And so, this is something that a lot of people don't really take time to think through and define for themselves. And I'm the first one to admit this is how I did it, is we grow up and we do what we're told, and we may be brought up in a church or we have certain things you do or don't do, but we've never really thought about the why behind behind certain behavior that's either encouraged or discouraged. And I think it's real important that people should take some time to step back and bring it down to the origin and come up with your own personal philosophy and create your own code of conduct. How am I going to relate to the world? What kind of person do I want to be? And in return, what kind of people would I like to relate to? And so I thought I had a good understanding on a lot of these things, and I've done a lot of reading over time, but it wasn't until a few years ago that it was during a road trip with my family, but I actually sat down and started formulating my own code of conduct. And I was actually inspired by, again, Harry Brown. I got my hands on an audio seminar he did in the late 60s, and it was I think it's 20 CDs. You can find them on the internet, and it's called Rule Your World. So Rule Your World. And I think this is the material he put together prior to writing his book, How I Found Freedom in an Unfree World. And it was just an amazing seminar, and it got me to thinking. And so I started putting together my own code of conduct. And, in my code of conduct, I was forced to express that code of conduct. I had to express my philosophy, and it caused me to rethink how I look at religion and traditional religions and all these other things. And so I actually put it all down on paper and worked it out in my own mind, and actually put it up on the web just as a permanent place that I can go back and refer to. And so I'll give out the website if anyone's interested in listening to it. It's purely for personal benefit. If anyone else gets benefit out of it, they can take some ideas and develop their own personal code of conduct. But I called it, kind of tongue in cheek, I called it The Book of Steve, and the subtitle is My Philosophy of Life, Liberty, and Happiness. And so the website is thebookofsteve.wordpress.com. So thebookofsteve.wordpress.com. And so that was, in answer to your question, the first step to living free in an unfree world is discover who you are and what your relationship to the world is. And then from there, decide how you're going to relate to the world. And once you do that, you can have a compass that guides you in your life, and it will help dictate all your actions going forward.
Yeah, it's interesting because when I talked to Jeremy on the last show, he said basically very similar. He had a very similar approach, or he has a very similar approach, and that is he talks about it in terms of your single motivating purpose. And so, and he runs everything through that in terms of what he does with his life, and that sort of can help you with all kinds of decisions, and it frees up all kinds of things. So it's interesting how you guys kind of have the same philosophy, but coming at it from a little bit different angle.
Well, and just to add to that, I like to break it down to a core axiom or a basic foundation, and one of those foundations that is core to this existence we have as human beings, and that core belief is that life is sacred, or the sanctity of life. Everything we do is based upon our own individual lives. And so from there, we can extrapolate a lot of things. Number one is, I think most people would agree, although some won't, but most people would agree that we own our own lives. We control our own energy, and that we own ourselves. And so once you have that basic core belief that you own your own life, from there you can extrapolate that, certain things that are derivatives from our life, like property and our liberty, are core pieces of our individual life. So I broke it all the way down to life is sacred, and then from there I get life, liberty, and property. And then you can look at the world. If you believe you own your own life, that life is sacred, then you must also respect that the other person owns their own life, and they have the rights to their own life, liberty, and property. And so there you can use that as a very strong compass in all your actions. That what am I doing to respect the life, liberty, and property of others, and in governing myself in the meantime.
Nice, yeah, I love it. It reminds me of the Rush song "Free Will."
Oh yeah,
I will choose free will, as opposed to the determinist philosophy, which means like you're just kind of floating in the wind. Right.
Well, it's funny. I was just thinking of that song this morning too, so that is great.
Oh, cool. Well, maybe I'll use it for the bumper music for this episode.
I think that was great.
That might be fitting. Let's get into some of the fun stuff. Perpetual Travel. That's your site, theperpetualtraveler.com. Now, what does that mean, and how can someone become a perpetual traveler, or as we've talked about, permanent tourist, or what's the other one? There's like another PT.
Oh, yeah. The PT, it's a philosophy, really is what it is, and it can stand for a lot of things. It can stand for perpetual tourist, permanent traveler. One of my favorites is prior taxpayer, and another privacy technician, prepared thoroughly. You can just have so much fun with that word, and you can even be a part-time PT,
Yeah.
So, but it is, I think one of my favorites is a possibility thinker. And so perpetual traveler is kind of a loose philosophy that basically means, for me personally, it's a personal philosophy and strategy. It's a state of mind, number one, and it's a personal philosophy and strategy of reorganizing your life or structuring your life in such a way that you can maximize your individual freedom. So it's a way of going about maximizing your individual freedom. And so it ties in real well with the traveling theme, because freedom of mobility is a core expression of individual freedom. And so when you have freedom of mobility, it gives you, I know you're well traveled, and it just opens you up to so many new and exciting things. And in order to become a perpetual traveler, this is the part of creating situations in your life that you, number one, have the flexibility and the finances to be able to do that. And so that's why I created that website. It focuses more on the travel and experiences of life aspect of perpetual traveling.
Yeah. And so you yourself, you're not bouncing around the world and living in a different country every 6 months or anything like that, but you have the freedom to do that. If you wanted to, you could just take off and live wherever you want, right?
Absolutely. The PT philosophy is all about having options. And so right now, if I wanted to, because I've structured my life in such a way, and my financial support in such a way that I could live anywhere in the world I want to, and I can get up and go at the drop of a hat. Yeah. Naturally, there's some places that I like better than others. And so one of those places is Southern California. So I do spend a lot of time in Southern California, but I am in no way fixed to this location. And the PT also stands for passing through. And from a freedom perspective, it's always better to be treated as, especially when you're dealing with violent individuals who organize themselves together and call themselves government. When you're dealing with different groups like this in different so-called countries, it's funny, but tourists are always treated better than their own citizens.
That's right.
And citizens are looked at as, cows to be milked or tax slaves, whereas tourists are usually treated differently. They're welcomed in as a welcome guest in most places. Oftentimes it's from purely economic reasons. Countries love to have tourists come and spend money there. And so when you change your outlook on the world and consider yourself a perpetual traveler or a permanent tourist, and you structure your life that way, you have a certain sense of freedom because you know you can get up and leave at any time whenever the locals are no longer welcoming to you. Yeah. And so you can take your time, energy, talent, and money elsewhere if they stop welcoming you. And so that's the beauty of the PT philosophy, is that you can get up and go at any time, and you're treated much better most of the time too. That's
right. Yeah, that definitely. Now, how are you able to do that? Like business-wise, you don't have anything tied to any one location, or do you have is it the internet that's allowed you to do this, or?
Yeah, it's absolutely the internet. And what's nice is I've restructured my life in such a way that, I have a mission, and I'm actually a pastor of a church. And part of that mission is to talk about these principles of self-ownership and without getting too religious, I like to talk about the concept of God. And my definition of God is a supreme being. And my belief is that we are all gods. We are all the supreme beings of our own lives. You can believe in an external God if you want to. That's, I don't personally care if anyone does that or not, and it's none of my business either. But I do know that I am the supreme being of my own life in as much as I can control it. And so that's how I define God. I think you're a God. Every individual is a God of their own life. And being owners, self-ownership, self-ownership of your own life, my church belief is that, life is sacred. So with that said, this is a long way to answer your question, but so what I've done is I've devoted my life to promoting maximizing individual life, which is the mission of my church. And so I don't earn an income, but my church owns businesses that I donate my time to, which generates enough revenue so that the church can support me as I travel the world and be an example into the world and talk about these concepts of self-ownership and sanctity of life. So coming back to answer your question, on behalf of the church, I run multiple online businesses that are focused in these areas of maximizing individual liberty, areas of protecting your life, liberty, and property, and providing those services to people.
Nice. Yeah, I love it. So now one of them is keepyourassets.net. I wanted to talk a little bit about that because that's kind of you turned me on to the New Mexico LLC through that site. And also, it's just been a great resource to learn all kinds of stuff for me. And I know you have a membership kind of site attached to that. Can you elaborate a little bit more on what the site's about?
Sure, absolutely. And this comes right into that philosophy of kind of like Harry Brand mentioned, or I talked about him earlier, where he said freedom is self-defense. And to bring it back to the philosophical level, I think there's three things a person can do to maximize their freedom. And the first thing is to master themselves or to govern themselves. And one of my favorite philosophers and authors is another gentleman by the name of Robert Lefebvre. And he coined the term autarky. And, a lot of people, freedom advocates out there, like to call themselves anarchists, which is a good term, but I think it could be better. Anarchy comes from the Greek meaning, which means to be without ruler or without a ruler, right? Or without government, if you want to look at it that way. And I think that's okay, but it's not great because typically anarchy, when people say anarchy, the second thing they're thinking of is chaos, or rebelliousness.
Yeah, or mohawks and tattered leather jackets and Molotov cocktails, right?
Yeah, people who, a lot of them who don't respect property rights. So Robert Lefebvre coined a better term, and he called it autarky. So it's autarchy, not to be confused with the version that's spelled with a K in there. Autarky with a K means economic isolation, self-sufficiency, where you have no other help, which really we all need each other to trade with. Otherwise, our existence will be like Robinson Crusoe on an island where we don't really have much, a very basic standard of living. Yeah. So you need other people to trade with and have the division of labor and trade with. So Robert Lefebvre used autarky with a CH in there. And the meaning of that is self-rule. Mm-hmm. So self-rule. So, personally, I don't want to be an anarchist without a ruler. I would prefer that we lived in a world where everyone ruled themselves.
Sure.
And so I think it's a higher level, a more sophisticated level of personal philosophy to where you work on maximizing yourself. So the three things a person can do to maximize liberty are number one, master themselves. In other words, look at our actions and our behaviors and make sure that we're not violating the life, liberty, and property of other people. Are we accepting stolen funds, money that's been taken from others? Are we accepting public handouts or benefits, which is basically stolen property? Mm-hmm. Are we the kind of person that says there should be a law against something that we don't agree with? That's participating in the plunder. So that's number one, self-rule ourselves, self-govern, and make sure we're not participators in murder, theft, and slavery. And so it can be very subtle things. So we have to really, practice introspection and look at our actions. And so that's number one, to advance liberty. Number two is we want to educate others. So do everything we can to promote and persuade and hopefully convince others that freedom is a good thing, that self-ownership is a good thing, that property rights mean something, because property is simply an extension of our own personal lives. Property is the fruits of our labor. It's literally, we trade the sweat of our brow to create something of value and to trade it to others. If any attack on property rights is an attack on your individual life and your right of self-ownership. Sure. So the things we can do is try and educate others and show them that property rights are important, self-ownership is important, and it is a better way to live. And it's through mutual, peaceful, voluntary association is better for everyone. So that's the other thing we can do, is help educate people. Now, granted, that's not very effective, but you still must do it, and you have to do it in a way that does not use force, because then you violate your own principles. Mm-hmm. So all we can do is persuade and educate. Sure. But the third and final thing we can do to advance liberty is to practice self-defense. And so there's many strategies for defending your life, liberty, and property. And so the business keepyourassets.net is focused on that aspect primarily, which is helping provide the tools of self-defense so that you can protect yourselves from those plunderers out there and those killers, thieves, and kidnappers, from those attacks. Yeah. And so the New Mexico LLC just happens to be a great tool. I tell people there's no silver bullet, but there's lots of tools that are available. The New Mexico LLC is, for instance, is a way that you can, within the existing legal structure in the U.S. and most parts of the world, is a way that you can own property anonymously, very privately, and you can own real estate, you can own bank accounts, you can own personal property, vehicles, and it's a great way to take assets out of your name and split up the ownership of those assets into these other legal entities so that you are less of a target to the plunderers. You make it more difficult for that plunderer to come in and take your property. So New Mexico LLC, the three quick benefits of that is there's no public record anywhere of who owns that company, not even at the state level when you file the paperwork. When you set it up, there's no public record of ownership. Number two, there's no annual fee that you have to pay to the state, so that keeps your costs down. And then number three, there's no annual reports that you have to submit to the state of New Mexico in most cases. And so it's not a perfect tool. It is a tool created by the state. It's a creation of the state, but it is a tool that allows you protection in the world we live in. And I want to clarify this real quickly, because there's a lot of freedom advocates out there that are totally against using any state-created entity. And it has to do with what's called sanction of the victim.
Right.
And this is where I credit Robert Lefebvre so well in his writings, because he really helped understand this. And he said, the only time you're sanctioning the state, in other words, you're sanctioning yourself, is when you have a choice, a better choice, and you don't accept it, and you take the you take the state-handed benefit.
Right.
But when you have no choice, you're no longer sanctioning the victim. You are the victim because you have no other choices.
Right.
So using a New Mexico LLC is not sanctioning the victim. It is because you have no other choice, it's the best choice available to provide self-defense. And so another good example is the roads that we're on. Some people will argue, if they argue using an LLC for protection is using a tool of the state, it depends on your situation, obviously, if you don't have any better choices out there. But you can use that same argument with the roads. If you use the roads, you're sanctioning the state. They're sanctioning their actions. And that's simply not true. You use them because that's the only choice you have. You have no better choice. And so you are not sanctioning the victim. You are the victim in this case. And so New Mexico LLC is a great tool. We have other tools on there as well. And I won't go into a commercial for that. But that's probably one of the most effective things we can do other than self-mastery and self-rule or autarky is to provide for our own defense. And when we provide for our own defense, we stop looking and seeking outward for other people to provide our defense, and which usually means violating someone else's property rights.
Yeah.
So personal responsibility comes right in with all of that.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Now, who should have a New Mexico LLC? Do you think like everyone should? Because, I mean, people listening to this show are probably from many walks of life. Like some people have no income right now. Other people have internet businesses that are allowing them to travel all over the world, and they're making a significant amount of money. And then of course you have people that own real estate and things like that. What's the ideal person to own a New Mexico LLC?
Sure. Because it's a tool of self-defense, I naturally think everyone should at least seriously considering having one. And the reason is the LLC is a legal structure or a legal entity that's recognized anywhere in the world. So you could actually open up bank accounts in Bangladesh with a New Mexico LLC. Yeah. And so what it does is it gives you a commercial interface into the banking world, and doing it through an entity that's not specifically you as an individual. So it gives you a buffer of protection there, because it is treated in most in just about every law in every country as a separate legal entity. So with that comes protection or a limit of liability. So LLC means limited liability company. So it doesn't mean shirk your responsibilities, although like any other tool, it can be abused. People can use it to defraud others. And, of course, that becomes a moral problem. Mm-hmm. But it's just like a gun. You can use it for murder or you can use it for self-defense, and that's all the LLC is. So it's a great way for a person to, asset protection and privacy, which are two different things, but they work very well together. Mm-hmm. So on the privacy standpoint, it's a great way to anonymously own property, especially if you live in a regime where individual property rights are under attack. And individuals are under attack. So I would argue that most places are that way now. So it's best to not own anything in your own name. So everyone can use it for that benefit. In the U.S., an LLC can be treated as a business. And with a business, your own small business is one of the best tax shelters in the world because you can convert most after-tax expenses into or personal expenses into pre-tax business deductions or business expenses, mm-hmm. so that you can reduce legally your tax liability at the end of the year because you've ran everything through your own small business, your own LLC, which could be an internet business or it could be a bricks and mortar business. And so it becomes a great tool to minimize, the theft of your property, whether it be taxes or lawsuits. So it can be used for that. It's also very helpful for banking situations. You can use an LLC to open up bank accounts anywhere in the world. So it's just a great tool.
Yeah, I'm going to throw out the argument that I get when I mention the New Mexico LLC to people, because I own 3 of these, and I'm using them for different purposes, and I think it's great because I also live in California, and you look at the California LLC, and it's just a horrible deal. It's like $800 a year. And it doesn't offer you that anonymity. It doesn't really offer you much protection. I mean, it's a total ripoff. And I think this is all because probably because California is in such a bad state in terms of the economy that it just keeps all these things are just get more expensive, and then you have the sunshine tax, which is such a joke. But anyway, so the question that I always get when I tell people, hey, this is a great way to go if you want to protect your assets, if you want to have anonymity. And Mexico LLC is a great tool, and the instant response is almost unanimously, but how do I pay my taxes?
Right, yes.
So,
yeah, I love that. And the simple answer is you pay your taxes the way you always do.
Right.
The only difference is if you want to take advantage of the tax benefits, you can, and you can reduce those taxes because maybe you don't agree with the endless wars. Maybe you don't agree with the drone strikes on innocent children halfway around the world. Maybe you don't want to finance those things. Maybe you don't want to finance the pet pork barrel projects that are going on around the world and the wasteful airports built in the middle of nowhere and bridges to nowhere in Alaska. There's no shortage of waste out there. So maybe you don't want to contribute to those things. So you can use that LLC as a great tool to minimize and oftentimes even eliminate your taxes legally. And I tell people I'm not a tax advisor. I'm not a lawyer. So always, if you need professional help, please get it. That's what I tell people. But don't look at me as your expert. I believe in self-ownership and self-mastery and personal responsibility. So educate yourself so that you don't have to rely on third-party experts. And so that's a big part of keepyourassets.net is giving people the tools to do that. But yeah, it's, I tell people if you think taxes are a good thing, pay more. That way the burden will be reduced on the rest of us, so pay as much as you can. I always get a kick of the Warren Buffetts and the Bill Gates who come up, I call them the self-hating rich. There's people who feel guilty that they're wealthy, and so they go out and, they talk about wanting to eliminate the estate tax or increase taxes. Well, those guys are pretty wealthy. Rather than talking about all that, they ought to just donate all their money to the Treasury, and that way that would reduce the burden on the rest of us, instead of trying to push through legislation that raises taxes for everybody else. So they're very hypocritical, and they're people that need to sit down and really focus on a core philosophy.
Yeah, really. That would be nice. All right, so this is a topic that we could probably spend easily an entire show on or several shows, but I definitely want to touch on it, and that's Bitcoin. So it's been a really hot topic in the last few months, and you're the one that actually kind of pushed me over the edge. I think when I was sort of not sure about Bitcoin and talked to Trace Mayer, and he was real excited about it, and then sat down with you a couple times, and finally back in January this year, or December last year, I finally bit the bullet and bought some Bitcoins. And so I'm super excited about it now. I luckily got in before it kind of took off. But what I wanted from you was, why should anyone buy Bitcoins at this point? I mean, we've had the big run up. It's now kind of sitting at $115 around there. What's the point of buying into it now or getting involved with it?
Sure. There's many reasons, but the caveat is that
actually, let's back up. Actually,
sure.
There's probably people listening that don't have any clue what Bitcoin is.
Sure.
So maybe let's, if you have just a quick definition of what Bitcoin is.
You bet, absolutely. And the quick definition is it's a free market money, and it was created as it's a digital currency that people can transfer back and forth to each other. And the way I like to define it is that Bitcoin is a new commodity created to serve market demand for a better medium of exchange. So that's a mouthful, but it's a new commodity created to serve market demand for a better medium of exchange. So commodity being that it's its own unique item that has special characteristics that people end up valuing for certain reasons. And the primary reason is that people are looking for a way to better protect and utilize their own money. Current systems are broken. The current banking system is broken. Purchasing power of state-issued currencies has been inflated away and become less and less. I think the U.S. dollar, since going off the gold standard in so many years ago, a long time, I think it's lost over 90% of its value. of its purchasing power. I would argue more than 98% of its purchasing power. So people have been robbed for centuries through inflation and through through the abuse of the monetary system or the control of the monetary system. So the marketplace out there created a bunch of individuals created this new digital currency, which was designed to mimic gold in a lot of ways. And I won't go into all the details, but one of them is its scarcity. There's a finite number of them that'll ever be issued, and they provide an easy way for people to transfer value across distance, almost frictionlessly, with low to zero transaction fees and instantaneous payment without any middlemen. So a good way to explain that by contrast is you look right now at traditional banking systems. When you want to pay someone around the world, the other side of the world, you have to put money in a bank account. Then you have to either transfer those funds to a PayPal account or use a credit card that's tied to that account. And so you can make a direct payment through, say, a credit card processor or a PayPal network, and you pay up to like 3.5% transaction fee. Or if you do a bank wire, it's going to cost you $45 for an international wire, and it's going to take 3 days. And all that's happening is digits are being transferred instantaneously from one end of the world to the other. But for some reason, it takes the banking system 3 days to get those funds over, and they extract a huge fee from you. And so that system is broken. There's a need for instantaneous payments. So Bitcoin allows people to pay each other person to person with almost zero transaction fees and instantaneously with about the speed of an email. You can pay someone across the globe. And the most exciting thing about it is you can two things. You can define your own anonymity, so you can make it as anonymous as you want it to be. It doesn't come that way out of the box, but you can anonymize it, and but also it removes the middleman away from your payments and your money. So you become your own bank essentially, and I know when you go to open up a bank account or cash a check, they look at you like you're a criminal. It's your money in there. But if you go read your bank account agreement that you have with the bank, I challenge anyone listening to this to go to your bank today and ask them to give you a copy of your bank account holder agreement. And when you read that, it'll scare you to death.
Yeah.
Because it basically says they have the right to freeze your funds, turn them over to any other person for any reason, and basically lock you out of your account. In other words, it's their money unless they choose to let you have it.
Yeah, I actually, a few, maybe 3, 4, 5 years ago, I was switching banks. I was switching some funds from one bank to another, and I had to go through this process. They said, well, if you're going to open up an account, I think I was doing actually a brokerage account, and they said, if you're going to open up an account with us, you have to agree to these things. And it was a phone interview, basically like a phone interview, and the first one was exactly what you said. The guy on the phone basically said, well, due to the Patriot Act, here's the things that we can do and we're allowed to do, and you have to agree to this to open up an account with us. And it was like, anyone can come in and take your funds. We can authorize any agent of the government or anyone that has suspicion that you may be involved with something, they can just come in and freeze everything and it's gone. And I mean, I was just freaked out because I didn't know any of this before. I basically just said, well, no, I'm not going to agree to that. And I said, that's ridiculous. That's way over the top, an invasion of privacy, and it just puts me at all this risk. And he agreed with me. The guy on the phone was like, yeah, I totally agree with you, but this is the only way you can open an account.
Absolutely. It's scary. And I mean, it's... I don't know how many people have had a PayPal account frozen on them just because do some activity out of the ordinary, but they can tie up your funds for 6 months and before they release it, if they do release it. So that system is broken too. This is the old legacy banking system. Plus, as you mentioned, there's no privacy. You have to provide ID. You have to have state approval. And, whoever controls the money controls the world. And right now it's the banksters who control the world. The politicians are their puppets, and the tax revenue agencies are their collection agents. So, so when you use their system, you give give up a lot of your freedom. And so Bitcoin was created to address this problem and give us back control of our own money. So what we do is we become our own bankers. We can store our money on our own computer or our phone or in our brains. There's neat things you can do with it because it's purely digital information. And you and I can transact with each other without third-party interference. In other words, you and I can have a mutual voluntary transaction, and we don't have to get a third-person approval. And that's the way it should be. If we want to trade with someone, it should be nobody else's business as long as we're not harming anybody else. And the world has changed in such a way that under the guise of protecting against terrorism, they've used this as a tool as more surveillance and control of the masses. And so when you take control of the money and put it back in the hands of the people, you maximize and advance the liberty of the individual. So Bitcoin does that, and that's very exciting. So because of that, why when you ask the question, why should anyone want to get into Bitcoin? Well, if they value individual liberty and freedom, they should be cheering Bitcoin on and looking for ways to help make it more resilient and resistant to the violent third-party actors, whether that be governments or, basically it's other people. So it was built in such a way that it's tremendously resilient, and only time will tell. But so far, it's proven itself over the last 4 years. It's been in existence, and if it continues along that trajectory, the value of Bitcoin. It's basically the ultimate offshore bank account, because you can open up your own Bitcoin account. You can put money into it. You don't need any ID, nobody's permission. You can hide it in so many different ways that it's very easy to defend. And it's the ultimate flight capital. You can cross borders with access to millions of dollars because it's purely digital information. Right. And so because of all these things, there's potential for a tremendous amount of capital in the world to flow into Bitcoin, because as an economist, and we're all economists, by the way, but as an economist, people recognize that capital flows to where it's respected and where it's protected. Mm-hmm. So capital flows to where it's respected and protected. And historically, that's been to these offshore tax havens. And right now, there's about $30 trillion sitting in offshore tax havens, and they call them tax havens because historically they used to provide more privacy and lower taxes, and so it helped people protect their wealth. But that's vanished over the last several decades, and the benefits are no longer there because the banksters have pretty much taken control of the entire world global banking system. And we saw that last month when Cyprus, which is considered to be one of these tax havens, the banks failed and the government came in and basically seized, it was a bank robbery in reverse. It's where the bank robbed the customers and they seized the account holders' money. And so that sent a message to the world that your money is not safe in the banking system and it's not safe in government currencies. And so the potential that Bitcoin offers is that there are ways that you can make it very resilient and a better form of money in all those aspects of protection and value preservation. So what's happening now is people are waking up to the banking system being the con game that it is. And as I mentioned earlier, there's $30 trillion sitting in offshore tax havens. I shouldn't say offshore, but in tax havens. Sure. And imagine if only 10% of those people woke up and moved their money into Bitcoin. That would be $3 trillion. And you divide that by the total number of Bitcoins that will ever be in existence, which is only 21 million Bitcoins. You divide that into $3 trillion, and you come up with an average price per Bitcoin of over $142,000. Right now, today, Bitcoin is trading at about $115. And so the upside potential is tremendous. And so everyone should have a little bit of Bitcoin. Don't put your life savings in there, but you should have a percentage in there. And also, you should be doing everything you can to promote Bitcoin and Bitcoin-like currencies that preserve individual liberty, because your life literally depends on it.
Yeah. Awesome.
So that's why I'm in Bitcoin.
Yeah. Yeah. So as far as entrepreneurs go, a lot of the people in my kind of circles are internet entrepreneurs, have websites and, have this kind of perpetual traveler lifestyle, or at least have the potential of that. What do you see as in terms of Bitcoin helping people like us?
Oh, I love it for that reason, because as a perpetual traveler, you need to be able to access your money anywhere in the world with minimal hassle. Yeah. And if you're having to deal with the traditional banking system, there's all kinds of transaction costs along the way, plus restrictions. If your credit card company doesn't like your spending pattern and they think it's abnormal according to their reasons, they could freeze your credit card. And if you're out traveling, in certain parts of the world, you need to have access to your money. And so Bitcoin has the potential to become a global reserve currency or a global currency because the market is maturing, and it'll be a long time before it gets there, but it's getting easier and easier to where you can drop into just about any country in the world and find someone who will accept your Bitcoin and trade you the local currency or gold or goods or services for Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. And so also from a business person online is when you receive a payment in Bitcoin, it's irreversible. It's not like a credit card company that you can get chargebacks and you can lose a lot of money that way. A Bitcoin is cash for the internet. It's digital cash. Once you receive payment, you have instant settlement, and that money is yours. And you didn't have to go through any third-party service provider. It can be made directly to you, and that gives you so much freedom, and it protects your business too from chargebacks. And then you don't have those transaction fees either. So those are just a few things off the top of my head that I can.
No, that's awesome. And I guess at this point, it's just a matter of people adopting Bitcoin as an actual currency. So do you see that happening in the next year or 2 years, or how long do you think that'll take?
I call Bitcoin an opt-in community currency. So Bitcoin is an opt-in community currency. So if you want to start accepting Bitcoins, just let it be known that's the easiest way to acquire Bitcoin is to offer your products and services for Bitcoin. And incidentally, it's a great way to get Bitcoins at a discount, because if you're selling a product online and your cost of goods is, say, 50% of the retail value, and a lot of people have informational products, so your markup is much higher. But if your cost of goods is, say, 50% of the retail price, by trading those goods and services for Bitcoin, you're essentially buying that Bitcoin at your cost of goods, so you're buying it at a discount. And so that's the best way to acquire Bitcoin. And so you want to join this global community and start trading in that currency. And so all you have to do is voluntarily opt in, let it be known that you accept it, and then try and patronize other businesses who accept Bitcoin. And so, the problem in the world right now is national currencies, and so you shouldn't be trying to trade it for dollars or euros or pesos or whatever. You should be trading your Bitcoin for goods and services and accepting Bitcoin for your goods and services. And when you do that, when you close that loop, you never have the need to use national currencies, and you can simply abandon them to the degree that is possible. And when you do that, you withdraw support of the regimes behind those currencies, and typically, you're contributing to a more peaceful society because you're taking control away from the violent organizations. And another thing you're doing too is you're forcing them to be more competitive in how they manage their currencies, because they're going to want to woo your business back. If they can't steal it from you, they're going to have to compete in the marketplace. And so by simply using Bitcoin, you're making the world a better place because you're forcing these other issuers to be more competitive.
Awesome. Yeah, that's really, really awesome stuff. Now, you said you're about 80% now dealing in Bitcoin.
Yes.
So 80% of your financial transactions are in Bitcoin, and the rest is dollars.
Yes, and it varies too. I mean, I still have housing expenses that I have to pay in dollars, and oftentimes food. With the new tools and internet, right now I think there's a company called Foodler that you can buy all your order takeout food and pay with Bitcoin, and they'll have it delivered to you.
Nice.
There's another new app, a company called Gift Cards, Gyft. And on your Android app, you can download gift cards and you can pay for them in Bitcoin. There's a website called BitSpend, and you can buy basically whatever you want to buy. You tell them you want to buy it, and they'll go buy it for you and sell it to you in Bitcoin. So you can structure your life in such a way that you're spending mostly Bitcoin, and then put the word out that you want to accept Bitcoin as payment for your products and services, and maybe even offer a discount if someone pays you in Bitcoin, because that way you can avoid having your money run through a bank that can freeze your funds at any time. So 80% is hard to do, but it is doable. And as this Bitcoin community grows into a global force, you'll have more options to spend those funds. And right now, you can use Bitcoins to buy gold and silver. Mm-hmm. And then you can convert that gold and silver into any currency anywhere in the world. And, so for those transactions that you absolutely have to have the local currency, if you can't find someone to trade you directly for your Bitcoin for that currency, you can buy gold and silver, and then you can trade that for the local currency. So there's plenty of websites out there that'll sell you gold and silver for Bitcoin.
Yeah, so it just keeps getting better and better with Bitcoin, and every day I'm reading about a new company that's doing something innovative with Bitcoin, and it's just awesome to see. And actually, yesterday there's a blogger that I read. You may have heard of him. His name is James Altucher.
Oh, yeah.
He's one of my favorite bloggers. I read him just about every chance I get, and he just came out with a new book, and he's selling it. Advanced copies are available only in Bitcoin. So he put that out there yesterday, and I think it's cool. It's great that he's doing that. It's like he's got 200,000 Facebook fans, or actually it's more than that. It's something 200-something thousand Facebook fans.
Wow! So
he's obviously got a pretty huge following, and he put this out, and he said my book's coming out in June, but I wanted to offer it, and it'll be on. He said it'll be on Amazon in June. But I want to offer it for the early birds in Bitcoin. So you can pay me 0.1 Bitcoin now and get a copy of the book, or wait till June and then it'll be available on Amazon. So it's really cool. I'm going to buy it, even though I think it's a little overpriced. 0.1
Sure.
Bitcoin. I mean, you were looking at like $10, $11, but I think just the concept of it is so cool. And he's almost putting pressure on Amazon. Not that he's the biggest author in the world, but
right.
He's basically saying, look, you're buying Bitcoin and you get this, you get it right now, or you wait for Amazon, and I think that's really cool. So so I think if more people do things like that, like putting pressure on a company like Amazon, then things will start to change.
Absolutely, and there's two ways that'll happen. One is people will recognize the philosophical reasons why Bitcoin has potential to be a better medium of exchange. But if that doesn't get them, simple economics will get them, in that they see, once the market matures and stabilizes, but they'll begin to see that this is a much cheaper, simpler, better way in most cases to transfer value around the world, and also to store your wealth. And so, yes, there are risks, and yes, it's a young technology, but every day makes it stronger. And some of the best hackers and hackers, white hat and black hat, have looked at the code and have not been able to compromise it. And the cyber criminals have been unable to crack Bitcoin. And so they focus on operator error. They go focus on systems that where people don't protect their passwords, and they don't take care in protecting their own money. Because when you become your own bank, you take on that responsibility of protecting your own money. So you can't go look at some insurance company or credit card company or bank to make you whole if you were careless and lost your Bitcoins. So with freedom does come responsibility, and so people want more freedom. They've got to be more responsible as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's definitely risks involved, especially at this point. But I think I think it'll be around for a long time. So it's great to see.
Yes.
Yeah, so we could probably talk all day about all this stuff, and it's totally fascinating. But I want to wrap it up and I wanted to talk a little bit about. So yeah, I've known you probably for a couple of years, and one thing that it impresses me is that you've got kind of this positive attitude in the face of like this uncertain. People say it's an uncertain world, and we look at it as there's a lot of bad things in the world, and there's a lot of stuff that we don't really agree with, and just kind of wanted to get an idea of how what's your best tip or your best advice on how to maintain that positivity when there are so many things going on around you that you just are horrified by, or maybe you just don't agree with.
Absolutely, yes. I think a couple of things. Number one is having your core philosophy, being centered, if you want to use that term. And part of that is doing everything you can to not be part of the problem. In other words, are you acting in a peaceful manner towards other people? Are you a forgiving type person? Are you looking for the best in people? Are you, do you cut people slack instead of being quick to judge? We all make mistakes and none of us are perfect. And so that's where manners come into play. And manners are where you give the other person the benefit of the doubt when there's no clear-cut right or wrong situation. And so having good manners, being patient, and then having that equanimity of knowing that you're doing the best you can to be the best you can be. And when you are doing that, you do live at a greater level of peace. And, it's kind of the law of karma, actions have consequences. And so as long as you're taking appropriate actions where you're doing the best you can to not violate the life, liberty, and property of other people, you're usually going to get good, results back. You're going to get good consequences from those actions. It's the law of cause and effect. And so it doesn't mean burying your head in the sand and ignoring reality around you, but it's understanding reality for what it is, making the best out of it, and you look at that PT lifestyle as a possibility thinker and figure out, okay, what's the best way to leap over this problem or work around this problem and make the world a better place while you're at it. And so that comes, right around with practicing what you preach. And I think that's how you can maintain that positive attitude, which is critical.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and you touch on the kind of not facing down this right or wrong thing, and that's one thing that I've learned from the nonviolent communication is just kind of putting aside the idea of right and wrong and just letting that go. No one's going to agree on what is right, what is wrong, and so once you can let that go, it takes a lot of pressure off of, or it takes a lot of the pressure you're putting on situations off, and it's a much easier way to deal with people in general, I think. Absolutely. I think Harry Brown broke it down to the simple equation that, actions have consequences. So always consider the consequences of your actions, but more importantly, you have to look at two types of consequences. Most people look at just the short-term, immediate consequence of their action. If I steal this piece of property from somebody, it'll be a short-term benefit to me, but really it'll come as a long-term cost to me because society is worse off because people must now devote more of their resources to protecting their property as opposed to creating new products and services that could make my life better in the long run. Right. So when we focus on consequences of our actions, we not only need to look at the short-term immediate consequences, but more importantly, look at the long-term consequences of our actions. And incidentally, you can help deal with right and wrong in that respect in a lot of ways. And, Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that's about it. Did you have anything else you wanted to bring up? I know you're doing some affiliate stuff and if you wanted to say anything about that, we can throw that in here.
Sure, you bet. One of the things we're doing is trying to help people come up with ways to finance their freedom lifestyle, so that if you can create passive income, then you can maximize your life by focusing on the things that you want to do. And so we're in the process of creating an affiliate network, affiliate type program where you can actually build up affiliate sources of income. And so we'll have that, that info up at theperpetualtraveler.com, and as well as we can get info for your website in the future as well. And just to kind of add to that, I'm just excited talking to you today, and I love what you're doing with the website, and I'm a big follower, and I tell everyone about it.
Cool.
And excited to hear about your upcoming adventures as well as you travel the world.
Awesome, thanks. Yeah, appreciate it. Okay, and if someone wants to purchase a New Mexico LLC, you can do that on your website?
Yes, and as a matter of fact, for all your listeners, you can get a special discount for everyone listening. If you just write in the words Freedom11 in the referral code section, then that'll entitle you. You'll get an automatic 10% discount, which when you get to the checkout page, instead of sending in the full payment, just deduct 10% off of that and send your payment in, and we'll do that for your listeners.
Awesome, appreciate that, Steve. Well, cool. I'll put all the links in the show notes on the blog and freedom11.com. And so that's Steve Michaels, and it's keepyourassets.net and the perpetualtraveler.com. Again, Steve, thanks so much for coming on. That was super cool, and it was really fun chatting.
Thank you for having me.